Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision.
Hey guys, so I have an exciting interview today. I have Keziah Wonstolen here with me, and she is an award-winning entrepreneur and seasoned management consultant based in Denver, Colorado. After 13 years at Accenture, where she served as chief of staff and advised global organization on sales talent and operational strategies, she founded Vannin Chief of Staff. Through Vannin, Keziah and her team specialize in supporting private equity firms, their portfolio companies, and family offices, helping leaders scale efficiently, optimize operations, and build strong executive functions. Keziah has been recognized for her leadership and innovation, earning the spot on the Denver Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list and being selected for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Programs. As a thought leader in the chief of staff space, she continues to shape the future of executive operations and strategic leadership. Welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So, tell me a little bit about your business, tell the audience about your business so we know exactly what we're talking about as we dive in.
So we're a chief of staff focused company. You can think of us as we do two things. So we're hyper focused on the chief of staff role, and the chief of staff role, for those who don't know, is typically the role that sits next to the CEO or the leader of a business. They're their right hand. They're the person that takes the vision and operationalizes the vision. That can look different for all sorts of different companies. If you're a startup founder, your chief of staff is going to be doing something different than a public company CEO's chief of staff. So the role looks different, but the idea is the same. And what we've done at Vannin is created a framework around how do people think about the role. And then we also provide recruiting services to find that role. And we also have consulting services. So if you need an interim chief of staff or you want to do a fractional, have a fractional chief of staff, we do that as well. So we've been in this space for about 5 years, and we're the leading provider of chief of staff talent. And we have 25 people. We're based in Denver, Colorado.
That's awesome. I'm curious too because I think a lot of people can confuse a chief of staff with an executive assistant, and it's a very different role. So, what would you say is the actual difference?
So I like to think about we get this question a lot, and we also get it around the COO as well. And I will say there's three different things. They're all very important roles: the EA, the chief of staff, and the COO in terms of the structure and the support that an executive needs. What we find, though, is if you think about an EA, they're really the ones that are taking off the transactional work, right? If you think about your whole plate as the CEO and a leader, you have work that is repeatable, it's transactional, it can be done by someone that knows your kind of, knows what you need, but it's going to be repeatable. And so it's things like scheduling calendars, travel, um, you know, booking lunches, things like that. That's typically the scope of an admin. Then we go into a chief of staff. We actually at Vannin, I think about this as very different things. It's a different pipeline of talent. They're completely different scope of a role. Chiefs of staff are director level. They are typically coming from consulting, they're coming from banking, they're coming from a career where they've developed a functional expertise, they've managed people, they are moving into a leadership position. And then you're taking that talent group and then you're elevating them to a chief of staff role as a director. A lot of CEOs will use this role as a leadership pipeline because then the chief of staff will go on to become the COO, VP of Ops, whatever that, there's lots of different options. So that's what the chief of staff is doing. They're doing three things. They're aligning on the vision of the executive, they're executing, and then they're amplifying that leader. At Vannin, we've built out an entire framework around each of those components, what deliverable sets they own. But for example, a chief of staff is going to own the strategic planning process, quarterly planning, your goal setting frameworks, like think OKRs, KPIs, and then they're going to own things like your rhythm of business, which is the operating cadence of the company for the CEO, and then special projects. Special projects are really interesting because they're the things that you have to do as the CEO of your business, but you don't have time to do them. And so they can vary. Again, it goes back to like special projects for a public company CEO look different than special projects for a founder of a small 10-person business. Then we go into the COO, just to finish that like delineation between the COO and the chief of staff. The chief of staff doesn't have direct reports typically. So a COO will have direct reports. They have the talent from the operations team that report into them. Their C-suite They have uh they own the cost metrics on the P&L typically. And so you see the difference. Usually around 100 people in terms of company size is where we see that there is a need for the chief of staff and the COO.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, you don't really need both. And a lot of our clients invest in a chief of staff and grow them into a COO
Hmm.
because it's more junior. Sometimes it's a director is cheaper than a C-suite hire. So there's lots of different ways, but we see the chief of staff and the COO more aligned than the admin. Very important, just very, very different in terms of the type of talent that you see and need.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm curious too because I get to work with businesses and I get to do consulting. And it's like we do the strategy, we do the alignment, we do the execution, we help them with all that stuff, which is really fun. But it's interesting because most of the time I'll work with the owner and the leadership team. And I haven't yet have someone have a chief of staff. But when you're talking about it, I'm like, that would literally be the person that would like summarize all the stuff I do
Yes.
and help
Yeah.
make sure it happens. So why do you think it's such I guess why do you think it's like a job that people aren't hiring for sooner, considering when I think about it, I'm like, that's the person that I would align with at a company to make sure that I can help them scale.
Well, it's interesting because I started the business in 2020. I was a chief of staff at a large Fortune 100 company that had chiefs of staff all over the place. And so for me, this has been a very common role that I've seen be successful for years. Part of the reason why that I started this company was because I looked in the market at that time and no one was really talking about it, even from like an education perspective about the chief of staff role, right? Like, how do you do the role? And that was what drove me to build the business around
Mhm.
this, is to drive clarity around what the role does, what it should be. And we've seen, I guess, some stats around the hiring is that now 60% of Fortune 100 CEOs have a chief of staff.
Mm.
And we've seen the demand. I mean, we've grown aggressively over the last 5 years. And it's not just those public company CEOs. We're seeing the demand in the small mid-market stage too, for lots of different reasons. But the smaller companies are hiring it because it's a bit more of an agile role than bringing in a big kind of heavy hitter COO. And then as you grow and scale, mid-market companies are bringing in because there's some real value, especially in private equity. If you're private equity backed, there needs
Mhm.
to be someone that's going to own that value creation plan. And this is the role that does that. And private equity now is hiring a lot of these roles because they need that chief of staff to be owning the value creation plan in order to ensure that the value that the thesis by which they bought the company is being seen. So there's lots of reasons why these different types of industries and companies are choosing this role,
Mhm.
but it's all really aligned because it's execution. They're execution experts.
Yeah, I love that, by the way. I really love that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as well. So I know when you first started this, it was more of like a fractional a chief of staff. It was more a
Yeah.
fractional chief of staff. So as you were starting, what made you decide to start looking into going from fractional chief of staff to full-time chief of staff and actually become a recruitment agency?
Well, it's interesting because I actually started this business because I had left a big company and I wanted to work fractionally and I wanted to be a chief of staff because I love the role. That was the original why I started the business. And I was watching if you heard, post 2020, there was kind of a mass exodus of women from the workforce. And so there's an opportunity for me to pair women who wanted to work part-time in who maybe had like who had were raising children that needed a bit more margin. And so originally we started off by working 20 hours a week. That was like how we started. And because we have expertise in the chief of staff space, we took that model. And then frankly, we built our brand around the chief of staff role. And then I was getting calls from CEOs that run much larger businesses and they were looking and the demand was there for a full-time search. So we hired uh, someone who had built out a recruiting agency before, and we started in 22 and we have a full-fledged search agency now on the full-time side, but we still have our consultants delivering interim or fractionally for our clients as well.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And when you're looking for these individuals, what are the specific components that you look for to ensure that it's almost like you're working for your clients, but you're also kind of, it's like you're semi-hiring people in a sense. So
Yes.
what are the components that you look for to ensure that the chief of staff is going to align with the executive?
It's funny because I just did, we were just at Transform HR, which is like a big HR conference in Vegas. And we're talking about what makes a successful fractional engagement, because not only has the chief of staff role become more popular, but the fractional work option has also become a lot more popular over the last few years. And so for any fractional engagement, whether you're buying a fractional engagement or you're selling a fractional engagement, it's all important. It's the key is the scope, expectations. So understanding what needs to be done. So for a chief of staff role, we have a framework that defines, like, if you're going in there full time, what are you doing? And we take that scope and then we say, okay, but what do we need right now? What does the chief of staff need to focus on? Usually they look at two different things. One, a company needs just an operating cadence built. They need a goal setting framework. They need KPI structure built. That's one option for deploying a chief of staff fractionally. Or they just go in and focus on special projects. And special projects can be all sorts of things. Like, we have chief of staff running a strategic roadmap for a product lead right now, because that is key to beating their goals for the year. We have a chief of staff that's helping structure out a M&A research. So what company do we want to buy? So you're putting these like really strong kind of business athletes at these problems that the CEO ultimately owns, but the chief of staff is helping them get to an outcome.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
very cool. And I'm curious to like walk me through even the discovery process that you have with your team, right? Like how do you guys figure out in your own internal system? I mean, technically you've done this so many times
Yeah.
to create that for other individuals as well.
You mean like ask like how do we know if the client needs a full-time or a fractional? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, usually it's based on the size and scale of the client. It's
Mhm.
interesting now because before it was a little, like, when I first started this business, fractional was a new word and chief of staff was a new word for some people. And so I did a lot of educating up front of, like, what can a chief of staff help with? What does fractional mean? How do they deploy all of that? Whereas now we see a lot more when people reach out to us, they're very clear. They want a full-time hire. They're in
Mhm.
growth mode. It's a full-time job. Or they're in, there's a situation where they just need someone part-time for a period of time. And then we work with them. But we're consultants at heart. So my leadership team, we're ex big consulting. So we're a partner to our clients. And so we're really starting to think about, like, what actually is the challenge that
Mhm.
you as the leader are facing. And sometimes, honestly, going back to your earlier point, sometimes we get pulled in. Actually, a lot of times we get pulled in by board members that are going, the CEO just needs help. Like, can we figure out, is it a chief of staff? And we'll start by sometimes just going, like, let's lay out everything on the tape. Let's put everything out right now, like, that's taking up your time, and actually then go back to the job description of a CEO, which oftentimes doesn't happen, which I'm
Mhm.
sure you've run into, right? Like, no one ever talks about the job description of the CEO that often. And so we go back to that and go, what should you be spending your time on?
Yeah.
What falls off? And is it transactional, meaning you should go get an EA? Does it fit into the scope of a chief of staff? Or is there another option? Like, we were just talking to someone the other day that they just needed a CFO.
Yeah.
They didn't have clarity on their financials. And I was like, that's not a chief of staff. That's just, you need a good finance person or a CFO. So
Yep.
there's a little bit of that we really, really, we do a lot of upfront with our clients, because it's really important that if we do put a chief of staff in, that they're successful for them, because that's the
Yeah.
only role that we focus on. So that's
Yeah.
how we do it.
I really love that though.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Even when you're and I'm curious too, like even when you're vetting clients, like do you have a certain process for even checking out or vetting clients? Have you had any issues with that? It might not even be something that you have an issue with, because it sounds like you're doing the extra sort of consulting dynamic on the background, which I know when you do that deep dive, sometimes it like weeds people out really
Yeah.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we do a lot of that. We do a lot of
Yes.
that. Also, we're in a very lovely situation right now where the demand is very high for this role. And so we really want to set our chiefs of staff up into a situation that has been defined. Because I think sometimes what happens with this role is that people are hiring because they just need help. And it
Yeah.
hasn't actually been thought through in terms of, like, what is this person going to be doing? And then and we have this framework, but again, I'll share it, but it's aligning on the vision, putting a structure to execute, and then amplifying the leader. So align, execute, amplify. And what we find is that a lot of people, when they hire a chief of staff like person, they just pull them in and then they focus them on all the projects they need to execute, but they don't actually spend the time to, like, hey, here's where we're going as a business in the next 3, 5, 10 years. And this is why this is a priority. And they just throw them at these special projects. And then the chief of staff struggles to like prioritize or do anything like that. So we do spend a lot of time up front making sure that it's a good fit, both for the client and for the chief of staff.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
cool. Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum. And I'm curious too, because, even with all this dynamic of having this background, as a chief of staff with doing the alignment, the execution, right? So what does that look like within your own company, within Vannin? Like, how do you guys, what's your alignment dynamic, execution, all these strategies that on the back
Well,
end?
we feel a lot of pressure to be doing like eating our own dog food, as they say. One of the things we're talking about a lot right now is the idea of like AI. So,
Mhm.
which everyone's talking about, right? But when we're hiring chief of staff in particular, they have got to be not only AI literate, but like pushing the boundaries on AI and how we're using it. This role at the heart of it is organization and optimization. And if you're a chief of staff and you're not using it, or you're about to hire a chief of staff and you don't have that somewhere in your job description, you have to do that.
Mhm.
But the way that we operate internally is we have a strong rhythm of business. So I have a chief of staff, a VP of operations, and I have a chief of staff, a VP of operations. And the way that the VP of operations, all of this structure works is that we have a strong rhythm of business. We have a strategy planning session at the beginning of every quarter. We have a monthly, weekly, daily structure.
Mhm.
And that is how we set up our rhythm of business. We have a goal setting framework. We use a methodology called traction, EOS,
Mhm.
which it's an operating framework. And
Yes.
a lot of chiefs of staff are operating framework agnostic, I will say, because sometimes I get the question of what's the difference between a chief of staff and an integrator, if anyone's familiar with the traction methodology. And it's quite similar, other than that, if you do have people reporting up to it, then we usually prefer the integrator terminology, but the idea is the same. You're paired with a visionary and you're the person that's operationalizing the vision. So we run on traction and we have a tight rhythm of business and we are constantly communicating, because that's one thing we didn't really talk about in the amplification piece around a chief of staff is they're driving communications. So they're making sure that the leader stakeholders are being communicated to at the right time, the right place, and the right messaging, and
Mhm.
managing a lot of the change management, which, going back to the reason why this role is so popular right now, is because leaders are managing more change than they ever have in the past, even post 2020. Your job as a leader now is just to constantly manage change. And the chief of staff is the person that helps them do that with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very familiar with the traction methodology too.
Yes. Yeah.
I do the scaling up. So I utilize scaling up by Vern Harnish,
Yes.
and that one's,
Yes.
I love that one too. But I love the organization, obviously, and the structure and that dynamic and how it actually really transforms the internal dynamic of the company, being able to actually achieve that vision. I'm curious, what is the vision for your company?
Well, so we were recently, my goal originally was to be the world leader in chief of staff talent. So, if any CEO anywhere was looking for chief of staff, they'd call us, which we've really achieved. And actually in December, we were acquired by the Chief of Staff Association. So the Chief of Staff Association is the global leader in the Chief of Staff profession. They're based in London. They have Australian and New York offices. And we were acquired and we went through that process in December, and we're working through our integration right now. But that's really allowed us to not just take our talent um, business and grow it globally, which I'm so excited about, because right now the demand in Europe for this role is very strong. Um, and so we're excited to continue that expansion globally.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting. And so tell me a little bit more about the acquisition as well, because it sounds like it wasn't something you planned for, but it's definitely in line with the vision. What does that look like on the back end as you guys start to integrate the companies together?
hmm Well, we've been partners with the Chief of Staff Association for a long time. So they've been a strategic partner of ours. And as we built our businesses together and alongside each other in this Chief of Staff space, which is quite niche, right? Like we've partnered and been real strong cheerleaders of each other. And so last year really was like kind of the right stage and time to bring the teams together. The Chief of Staff Association, actually, they're what they do is they have education programs around the chief of
Hmm.
staff role. So they work with Harvard and Oxford, and they have a credentialing process where if you want to get credentialized as the chief of staff role, they will provide that. And then they have these opportunities to go to Harvard and Oxford, which is, it's just an incredible program that they run. So that's how we've been brought together. We're in the early stages of integration, so it's going really well so far. If anyone's ever done an integration, we're in, month 3. So it's been fun to bring it together.
And I'm curious too, what would you say is now the difference between being a partner with this Chief of Staff Association versus now being integrated? What are some of the changes that you guys see that maybe will be more helpful for you as you kind of move forward with them through the acquisition?
I mean, to me, one of the biggest parts of what we do and the value for our clients is that we're really working hard to find them the best chief of staff
Hmm.
for them and getting the best chiefs of staff out there. And a lot of those chiefs of staff are part of the chief of staff membership. That is where, top tier chiefs of staff go for education. And so we're elevating our network in that way, but also just expanding our network globally. We've primarily only been focused in North America. And so the ability to then build on the network that they've built out, both in Asia and Europe, is really exciting for me. So lots of reasons, and that we get to integrate our coaching programs with their programs as well. So any chief of staff that we place gets automatically enrolled in the Chief of Staff Association membership, and they
Mhm.
get supported because that's, again, like, it's really important. Like the first 90 days of any job, but if you're working for a CEO of a big busy business, the first 90 days, if you're onboarding, is really important. And so part of the way that we work is we support them through that 90 days, and now for the full year with a membership of this Chief of Staff Association.
Oh, that's
So we're
cool.
trying to make them successful even just, after we place them.
That's cool. I'm curious too, because when you say like you're following them along the onboarding process for the 90 days, how much would you say that you oversee onboarding with the company to ensure that the individual integrates?
A lot of it, so they go through our coaching program. So when we talk about aligning and execute and amplify, we're getting in with them and they're coached up on our framework so they can use
Mhm.
it and they can kind of blend it in with what the company practices are. But we're also talking to them about stuff that comes up, right? Like being a chief of staff sometimes is tricky and it's hard, and you don't have direct reports, and you have to manage through relationships and influence, and sometimes there's tricky situations. So we're coaching them through those situations. And I think especially in the first 90 days, getting integrated into a business is where we find it critical, and especially working with CEO, um, just to make sure it goes well. So we're involved quite heavily on the coaching side.
That's awesome. I'm curious too, because even with the onboarding, are you involved with the company as well during the onboarding process? Is there anything that you speak to them, like in addition about, or is it just focused mostly on the chief of staff and the training?
Usually we default to the company's
Mhm.
onboarding processes just because that's usually the HR has a standard. But what we will do is work with the CEO as well,
Mhm.
um, and offer coaching on that side to make sure that they understand how to properly use this chief of staff. And if we can help on the CEO side coaching of delegation, making sure making sure that they're integrating well with the chief of staff, we do a lot of that as well.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very helpful.
yeah. So it's really just the coaching and making sure that the role is successful. We're not just putting butts in seats and then, leaving.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know that can be very helpful because I know even the delegation part they have some trouble with from time to time and how
Yeah.
to
And it's hard
delegate,
if,
what to
yes.
delegate. And it is difficult
Mhm.
because they're just thinking about their role on a daily basis, what they're responsible for. And sometimes they
Yeah.
sort of get lost in those details, not understanding that they can let a lot of it go. Yeah.
Yes. And we
Yeah.
find too that it's interesting. We have clients that come to us that have had chiefs of staff every single time they've been CEOs. And they're like, hey, here's exactly what I need. I need this background. And they're very, very specific on what they're looking for. And then we have some who have been told or suggested that they need a chief of staff. And so in that case, if they haven't had a chief of staff before, there's a lot more of that education and how to be successful.
Mhm.
It's, they're not, it's a role that you're investing in, and so in order to optimize, like, we really work hard to make sure that they're using it in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
cool. And I'm curious as well, like if we kind of loop back over to the integration dynamic. So when you're integrating, as you guys are integrating, what would you say is something that has been more challenging with integration that maybe you didn't understand or you didn't know about integration? Yeah.
Well, we actually run a lot of integrations. Our chiefs of staff do that as
That's
fractional
awesome.
projects. So we've done that. I've done that a lot with M&A in my prior life.
Yep.
And so we've got a lot of experience in M&A. I think honestly, the biggest thing was that we're all based in Denver and they're based in the UK. So the time change, that's really what
Yes.
the biggest, but in general, because we've known them for so long, it's been great. And I've seen
Yeah.
not great ones, so
Yes.
that's kind of the current situation.
Well, it's kind of fun. I feel like you got away with a lot of the normal challenges just based on your background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And then like our chiefs of staff are out there running M&As for leaders right now as their special projects. So it's been, we're able to use like that real-time learning into our own integration, which has been helpful.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm curious too, because now how many people actually work with you guys in North America, just under Vannin?
So we have 25 people and we've worked
Hmm.
with over 300 CEOs since we started. Um, and yes, that's our team. We're based in Denver and we have a few people in New York.
Okay. And is New York
Okay.
your crew or is that part of the
That's
acquisition
our
crew?
crew.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so fun.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, what made you guys decide, because it sounds like most of it's in Denver, what made you decide to have some of the individuals based in New York?
A lot of our clients are private equity and a lot of their headquarters are in New York. And
Okay.
so that's a lot of it just based on where our clients were. And then as we expand into Europe, it just made sense for us um, to go there.
Yeah. And now that you have chief of staff, are you working with them and their teams to sort of train them on what you guys do, or are you going to be hiring separate individuals and placing them over in Europe?
There'll be a little bit of both,
Yeah.
I think, as we're still working on that piece. But yeah, that's kind of how we're gonna take our practices that we've
Mhm.
refined over the last 5 years and then build them into the European growth.
Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I know there's a ton of opportunity right now in Europe for these roles in the Middle East as well,
Yeah.
where we see growth. Usually the principals are looking for chiefs of staff.
Okay. Amazing. And I'm curious, even like the team dynamics of your team, what does your leadership team look like? Like, what does it look like to basically be able to run Van? And I know you have 25 people. What's the leadership
Mhm.
team?
Well, one of the things I'm super proud of is that our leadership team, we're 100% women owned and led. That wasn't intentional, but it was something that I think we continue to build on. Our leadership team is made up of we have a head of operations and we have a head of delivery and then a head of product and then I have a chief of staff. So the structure is a lot of what we tell our clients. And I'm a founder. I founded this business and have grown it. Um, and so it's been good experience for me to really walk in the shoes of a lot of our clients. And but yeah, our leadership is very strong. They came not only from big consulting, but then also from tech,
Hmm.
growing fast growing tech companies. So we have 50-50. So two of them are from fast growing tech backgrounds, VC backed, PE backed, and then the other two, me and Caitlin, are both from big consulting backgrounds. So it's been a wonderful combination, and they've all been with me for almost 4 years, 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
So it's been
That's
a
awesome.
long-standing team. Mhm.
That's cool. I'm
Yeah.
curious too, because even this dynamic, whenever I talk to women it's women-owned companies that have more of, a heavy set, like female dynamic within the company, like they constantly say it was an accident, but they
Yeah.
also say they love
Yeah.
it, And from your perspective, because I know you've gotten to work with a lot of companies as a consultant, right? And I know working as a consultant, sometimes it is a very male heavy like industry. What would you say the difference that you notice between having like the female kind of heavy leadership dynamic versus male heavy that actually comes through that you've noticed?
Um, I actually don't. I mean, I haven't thought about that
Yeah.
as specifically compared to a male heavy leadership team, but all I know is that we're wildly successful in the structure that
That's
we've built
awesome.
because we continue to grow, 100% year over year. And so I think whatever we've got going on is working.
Yes.
And I haven't really compared it to like if to like men leadership teams in that way.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, actually. I don't think about that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've thought about it like from time to time because I'm like, what is the difference when I'm with like a group of females and a group of males?
Yeah.
And there's not too much difference. I was curious if you noticed
Yeah.
anything, but I haven't noticed too much of a difference because it seems like people who are inspired by their roles are just inspired by the roles and they just go for it. What I do notice, I think the difference is like after we're done with all the meetings and after we're done with the
Yeah.
schedule, guys like to do very different things than
Oh,
girls.
really?
Yeah, they're more
Maybe.
like yeah, they might want to go out and
Mhm.
get some drinks or something, and girls are like, let's go chill and have dinner and like a glass of wine and just like hang
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
and relax.
Yeah.
And that energy, once I think we get out of business and into the day to day, feels very
Yeah.
different to me. Where sometimes I'm like, I can't keep up with you guys. I gotta go home. I
That's
need
so
my
funny.
beauty sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. I mean, now I'll
Uh,
go and I'll observe. I'll come back to you with my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I like to see also it's like the different strengths that we bring in those different roles and how to just merge them together. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, because you, I mean, I know you love what you do and you love what you're doing. And I know a lot of founders, they choose to exit after acquisition and you have no plans to exit. So what is it like? Why are you staying? What about this next chapter is so exciting to you about what you do that you're not going?
I am really driven by this idea of that time is not a renewable resource. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things you can't buy more of. And I'm obsessed with the way that leaders are spending time. And so many leaders that I work with are
Hmm.
spending time potentially in not the best way, not just for the business, but also for them personally. And about 6 years ago, my eldest was in the hospital. He was in a coma for 2 weeks. And it was just one of those
Oh,
moments where like
wow.
your life stops and you're just going, what am I doing here? I don't have an infinite amount of time. And so let me
Yeah.
be really, really clear about what I want to do with my life, which was I'd always wanted to start a business. And those were
Hmm.
things like that that happened to me a few years ago that started to push me down this path of there's not a lot of, you don't have a lot of time. So if you want to do something, you need to
Hmm.
do it. And there's this urgency around it. And that then evolved into, wow, the chief of staff role is really just this awesome tool that can help leaders prioritize, optimize, like figure out what
Hmm.
they're doing, take stuff off their plate and really push them into their zone of genius,
Hmm.
which is also a really great book to read about, you know, the leaders are like really expensive resources in your company.
Yeah.
And are we making sure that they're spending the time on the right things at the right time with the right people? So anyway, that was a bit of a long answer to why I continue to just be super passionate about this role, and that hasn't wavered. And now, man, we get to do it with this awesome partner, and we get to do it globally, and we get to continue to like evangelize the role globally. I'm just so excited about it. It's awesome.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. I mean, and I think even what you're saying, we want to free up the executives, right? We want to free up the
Yeah.
CEO to ensure that they're utilizing that genius, that time wisely. I could not agree with you more. Sometimes you see it and you're like, why are you focused on this every day?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's get you out of this as fast as possible.
But I
Um,
will say, like, actually having to be a CEO of a 25-person business, that's very small compared to a lot of companies. But I
yeah.
totally have such empathy to some of the clients that we work with. We're like, I get it. I know it's easy to stay in this space. It's comfortable.
Yes.
But in order to grow as a leader and to build and be bigger, if that's the goal, you have to be pushed out of your comfort zone a little bit. And that's where the chief of staff can help kind of catch everything else that comes
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's beautiful too because it's like I've seen small companies where the leaders get stuck in the role, but I also see it happen in larger companies and these larger roles. I had someone who was hundreds of employees, and somehow he had like become HR manager, and I was like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yes.
Because we would get on the phone for like the coaching and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to focus on this problem with you because you shouldn't even be talking to me about it. Like I appreciate that you're angry and you want to work on it, but like
Mhm.
I'm more concerned that we're working on it. Like,
Totally.
yeah, how do we get
That's
you
a
out of
perfect
it?
example
Yes.
though. Like that's exactly then. But that part of then figuring out, like if you think about I have to own this because I'm the leader. It's this
Yes.
HR problem. That's really important and really sensitive, but I don't have anyone to hand it to. That's exactly why our clients will get a chief of staff and go, okay, I need to figure out how to get this off my plate. Will you do that and help me figure it out?
Yes.
Because even just like the figuring out of where it goes and then the transitioning and like all of that and the change management, that's like a work effort. It's a project.
Yeah.
And I think people underestimate. that type of stuff. And that's like a perfect example of how then, you're totally right. They shouldn't be, but there's no one else to do it. So like, how do you
Yeah.
then
So then they're like stuck in it.
Yeah. And like the transition of things out. And one of our clients once explained to me, I thought the value of a chief of staff was like, he's like, I feel like I give you like a sheet of foil and you take it and you're my chief of staff and you take that sheet of foil and you tighten it up and then you take that ball of foil and you hand it to someone else. And that's like exactly what the chief of staff does. And I thought it was like a really good visual of like how the chief of staff takes this like kind of ambiguous challenge,
Yeah.
we'll develop a systems, a process, a structure around it, and then hand it to the owner or keep ownership of it.
Yeah. Well,
Examples.
and I think that's where like the CEOs have unrealistic expectations on themselves, right? And again, I've seen this so many times. Like it's funny, all the processes, all the things that we talk about, it's so simple. All the things that I do in consulting, everything I could say it out loud, it's so
Yeah.
simple. But implementing it is so complicated. And when you have that person to hand it off to make sure it's actually coming to fruition in the company, it's a big deal. Like it's a really big deal because if I expected the CEO to implement all the things we talked about right away, it's not even possible. Like most of the time we take one simple thing, and I know you know this, it's like the one simple thing. And then it's to the chief of staff, it's like, let's go and let's see how to implement this and structure it. And let's get okay, there's the KPIs. Let's get all these things put in place to ensure it's happening. And all of a sudden, this one little simple thing could take like sometimes a year to make sure it's grounded and stabilized and put into place. And then you work on the next simple thing and the next simple thing because implementing it with all of the individuals at these levels of a company, there's so many complexities. And I really see that CEOs have unrealistic expectations on themselves to handle all the complexities and think it's almost like they think they should do it or supposed to do it, as opposed to like, hey, how do we delegate this and make sure that all the complexities are spread out so nobody's like, you don't want anyone too overwhelmed that it's not going to happen.
Well, I think
Mhm.
it's that's a great example too of like,
Yeah.
then how do when you like have that one simple thing, like an operating system or, rolling out a goal setting framework,
Yeah.
it's like the rollout, but then it's also the adoption of it. And
Yes.
that's where a lot of these chiefs of staff are owning the change management and it's the communication and it's the relentless communication, right? It's that drumbeat that most CEOs that I know are visionaries. They're like, I have this big idea and I want to do it and I have this great idea. And then I just want someone else to drive that to the end, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what the chief of staff is doing. They're doing kind of like the boring stuff, right? They're then setting up the meeting structure, the communication.
Yes.
It's like, hey, you're going to there's going to be a town hall every quarter. Is the agenda prepped? What does it look like? And keeping that just rhythm of business is what we call it. And
Yeah.
it's a common phrase. And I don't know if you've heard it with your clients, but
Yes. Many
a lot of
times.
that is just that's what they own, right? And that sometimes gets a
Yeah.
little boring, but you need someone to do it because if the rhythm of business drops, then it's felt and the accountability then will the accountability structure that you've built throughout that rhythm of business then starts to erode
Yeah.
and then that results in business implications.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company. I think the cool thing about this too is like, you talk about freeing up time. Like we get to free up time for the executive in the business, which is awesome. And we love that. We love that the CEO can focus on their genius, focus on the vision, come up with these creative ideas, solutions, like it just get them fired up about what they do. Simultaneously, I think what people forget too is like, let's free up your time personally.
Yes.
Just because you're an executive, it doesn't mean that your whole life is a business. And people get burnt out, not just because of the things they're doing day to day in business, but because they work so hard and they don't get to enjoy the fruits of their labor
For
with
sure.
all the other like versions of life that they enjoy. And which also fuels you. It's like
Yeah.
someone who really loves, I have one client who loves spending time with his kids. So that was like the top priority. It's like, let's get shit organized. Let's get it
Yeah.
structured so you're not there that often and you're spending weekends with your kid again. And it's
Yeah.
like, he just, his life is like so different from just having that small bit of extra time to watch his kid grow up. And I think we forget that too. When we think about business, we're so focused just on the business. We forget about like the holistic dynamic of our life and how do we free up time to live our lives to the fullest? Because as you got to experience in a very tough way, life can be short and time is tricky and we
For
just don't know
sure.
what's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, and that's,
So
I mean,
important.
but I don't, if your client was able to do it, but I
Yeah.
asked that if you hire chief of staff, you should get 15 hours back in your week. What are you going to do with the 15 hours? That's up to them. A lot of the times we have clients that need to focus on the growth. They need to focus on clients. There's other stuff they do need to focus on, but I always like to bring in that personal element
Yeah.
of like, what are you going to use these 15 hours for? And, you know, their value, right? Like you can quantify the value of something like this, where if you are able to take and apply 15 hours of a CEO's time to something else,
Mm.
it's quite, the ROI is very clear. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's important. And we don't talk enough about that in terms of
Mhm.
like getting the support, that's needed. So
Yeah, just to get life, like to
yeah,
live life. Life doesn't all have to be like every day I'm in business and I'm gonna hunker down. I'm gonna be crazy and what do they call it? Oh, I forget what they call it. When we're just like going crazy, hustle. They call it
yes.
hustle. I'm like, I don't do hustle, but
Yeah. Well, and it's also
yeah.
like, I think it's a sustainability of your leadership team.
You can't
Because
last that long. We get
no, as a
older, our
board,
bodies shift. I'm in my
yeah,
40s now. I can't hustle like I could in my
totally.
20s. Yeah.
No, no,
Yeah.
if only,
Everything's
if
different.
only.
If
Yeah.
only, if
If
only,
only.
the late nights and stuff. I don't want to do
Mhm,
that anymore. But then
mhm.
it's like, how do we shift and transition that? And it's the organization, the structure, the making sure that all the things that we're talking about are in place. So I really, really love this. It's very, very cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm curious too, because even as we talk about like the individuals that work for you, right? You've had the same leadership team in your company for years, right? So what would you say is your culture? What does that background look like? Because people are really happy there, you know?
Yeah, I'm really proud of our culture. It's
Yeah.
super cool. I like, the more people that join, the more I'm just like, God, you guys are so cool. Like, I just can't. Sometimes I'm just at awe of the folks on our team, and they're so talented. They're so much more talented than me, and like, they're great chiefs of staff. Um, they, uh, we take we take white glove experience really seriously at Vannin,
Mhm.
because we're working with big leaders, right? And their time is really important, and we're very, very respectful of that, and we are communication. So we like take that really serious. It's very important. We have 5 values at Vannin that we abide by, and we bring that into all of our leadership meetings. We bring it in all our team meetings. We
Mhm.
hire based on it. We drive performance conversations based on it, and I think we've done a really good job about that. And that's a thank to our leadership team of building that infrastructure based on really values led. And that's been helpful as we've scaled. And
Mhm.
I think for me, coming from a big, massive company to then growing a business on my own, I
Mhm.
kind of was a bit skeptical because you always, I'm sure you get this too, right? Just like values, like, is that really? But actually, it was like, how do I scale? Because in the
Yeah.
beginning, as a founder, you are the business. And so it's like, hey, I have these things that are really important to me. How do you actually scale this so our clients receive the same experience across all of the different business lines? And that's been really helpful to set expectations and how our team works together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love values. I think values are so inspiring. I
They're
feel
kind
like
of
it's,
underrated. I
oh,
know.
they're so underrated.
I know. I know it's kind of like lame to say, but I feel like they are because it's like, how do you scale the culture in a good
Yeah.
way? I'm sure we'll experience that going from 25 to 50 and 50 to 100. Like,
Yeah.
just every
Well,
stage is going to have a different challenge.
and I think too is like when I talk to companies that don't have values in their business, and I'm sure you see this as well. It's like you're talking to them and they're talking to me about how they're struggling with hires, right? And how they hire these people and they don't do this and I'm doing, and it's like, well, what are your values? And we
Yeah.
don't have any values. We don't need values. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you're telling me you want things to be this way. And
Mhm.
if I summarize that, that's a value, right? And we
Yeah.
could just label it like integrity or something. And it's like
Yes.
you want integrity, you want communication, you want teamwork, right?
Mhm.
But you're not hiring and asking questions based on those things because you haven't established that they exist in your company. And so you're hiring people based on like, I think this is the best person for the job because the resume looks great. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden they get in and they're not willing to work on a team. They're more about like moving up themselves than like helping anyone else. They're lying to customers to get sales, and you're like
Yeah.
questioning why they're not doing what you want. It's because you
Yeah.
didn't ask the proper questions. So I think like people don't realize, just set those values, put them in the company, and people also are really inspired to live by values because it's something that if they're working for you, they connect with. Like it also like feeds part of your soul, and like you feel like you're working for a company with a soul instead of just a bottom line.
Yeah. Also, I
Yeah.
think people love clarity. And so the more clear, I think it's like, clear is kind. In that way, we
Yeah.
think about that a lot here, where I just think the more, and it's sometimes hard to drive clarity.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with value. I mean, some of that stuff, it's hard. It takes time and it's like not driving revenue. And, I have to take my CRO hat off a little bit when I do stuff like that. But it, it is everything you just said. And so I
Yeah.
think that's been a way that we've been able to scale.
That's cool. And I'm curious too, what are your values?
Well, we just looked at them. So one is tailoring solutions. So that's how we talk about white glove
Mhm.
experience. We talk about being sparking progress, which is really important for us in terms of like how do we continue to stay on top of the trends. So right now we're talking about chief of staffs and AI. Like if your chief of staff is not using AI, then you're already behind. And so like how
Mhm.
do we continue to push the boundaries on the work that we're doing? So we demonstrate expertise. So we're the leaders in this space. So everything we do is this what the leaders in the chief of staff space would be doing? So we're talking about that a lot. And we're talking about proactive partnership. So that's
Yeah.
really important, not just from our client's perspective, but internally as a team. If I see that you're struggling, too much work, whatever, I'm going to partner with you and see, hey, how can I help you? And so we have a lot of that within our team. And those are things that I've always and then the final one is, ownership, which is really important in a scaling company, right? Because it's not like you can say, "Oh, I have this idea. Let's use this team to go get it." Like, we've really tried to build this. If you have an idea, that's awesome. Go do it, own it, and take full ownership, and that means that you're building it,
Mhm.
you're driving it, all of that. So ownership has been really important for us. So those are our 5, and we really, really work hard to continue to push those in all of those different activation modes that you just talked about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Do you guys have certain ways that you celebrate successes around values? How do you do that?
So
Mhm.
great question. We do it monthly, and we kind of do a star of the month type of thing, and it's aligned to the values. So we pick someone that we've seen demonstrate and go above and beyond in one of the values, and we highlight them, and they get to kind of share a little bit about what they've done with their clients and things like that. So that's
That's so cool.
yeah, I really like it. Also, it's just kind of like when as you grow, like people are doing
Mhm.
cool stuff, like and being able to like celebrate some of that, taking a minute to just
Yeah.
celebrate some of the good stuff that's going on instead of always talking about like the challenges. I find that to be really refreshing, and we really work hard to do that.
Yeah. No, it's very true. I agree. It's like we can get focused on what problems there are, what to solve, all these different dynamics. And it's kind of like those little wins that just reconnect us to what we're doing, why we're doing it. I love customer testimonials. They're my favorite. Sometimes when I feel all stressed out and disconnected, I just read some customer testimonials and I'm like,
Oh
oh
yeah, like
yeah.
reading a good case study. Oh,
Yeah.
it
You're
like
like,
makes my
oh,
heart really happy. Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah. When it's
Yeah.
really stressful and you're like,
Mhm.
I just want to connect with something. I'll do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
And I'll
for
share it
sure.
with my husband and I work together. So I'll share it with my husband and I'll be like, okay, we've been really hunkering down. Like, let's
Yeah.
not forget. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
great stuff you're doing for sure.
yeah, no, it's so fun. And I'm curious too, because I know that you love to hire senior talent, right? So some people love to um hire just more individuals like they can train and start from scratch. What is it about hiring senior talent that you love as opposed to hiring someone that you can train from scratch?
So I think it's been the nature of our business because our our consulting team, the
Hmm.
people that are on that consulting team have 15 to 20 years of experience in consulting or banking. And then they have gone on to held the title of a chief of staff or a COO. So they're quite senior and they're jumping in and helping internally or fractionally. So that is the profile. And we consistently hire on that profile over the years that's what
Hmm.
we've found to be successful as a fractional or interim chief of staff. Uh, I personally, subscribe to the idea that you have right people and you got to figure out where to put them. So if they align with the values and, you know, they're a good fit, usually we've built around that person, and that's worked
Yeah.
really well for us. And a lot of our team is flexible. One of the things we talked about, I did a LinkedIn post about this, I think a few months ago, but our entire leadership team, there's 4 women, and 2 women in the past like year went on maternity leave. And because we were so flexible and understood everyone's roles, we were able to do these like rotations so that the head of delivery sat in the head of sales, the head of sales sat in the head of ops. And like we were able to do that. And I was really impressed with our team that we understood each other's roles and we were paying attention enough to be able to step into each other's shoes and provide that support. It was kind of a cool thing to watch
Yeah.
last year. Mhm.
That's actually a really great example, right? I think like again, it's this dynamic of we're not just putting the organization and structure in for shits and giggles because it's too difficult to do just
Yes.
to be like, I did it. But
Yes.
just when someone, two, it sounds like strong individuals within the company took a break, you were
Mhm.
able to manage everything while they were gone because of the structure, because of the understanding, because of the communication, and things don't actually fall apart. They're able to move forward still consistently, and it's not this huge gap. And I really think people don't, this is a great example because I don't think people see in action live very often how this type of structure, this type of organization actually impacts the company
For
long
sure.
term. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a
Great
combination of
example.
that, the infrastructure, and then also just
Yeah,
having the right people who have the right energy to
absolutely.
tackle new things. But I think that's based on our values. So you're totally right. And that infrastructure, especially if you're growing and scaling,
Yes.
it's like putting them in piece by piece as appropriate to enable that type of flexibility. I think that's what we found. And we also are all remote. So
Mhm.
most of the time we work in the office 1 day a week. But in order to run a remote company, you have to have structure. I
Yeah.
firmly believe if you don't have a rhythm of business, an operating cadence, a structure, you will constantly be reactive. And that's what pushes you to proactive. And it pushes to expectation setting, accountability. It's just way more apparent in a remote culture if you don't have
Yeah.
that than because you can't just like pop into people's offices. This just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is really inspiring. Thank you so much for coming. Tell the
Yes.
audience where, yeah, they can find you.
Yeah. So we are at vanninchiefofstaff.com.
Mhm.
That's where you can find more information. I post a couple times a week on LinkedIn. So you can follow me on LinkedIn at Keziah Wonstolen. And then if you're interested and if anyone's interested in like learning more about how Chief of Staff can help them, um, they can email us at hello@Vannin. And we have a contact page on our website. So lots of ways that they can reach out and yeah, just love to talk about this subject. So happy
Yeah.
to continue. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you highlighting it.
I mean, I love this stuff as well. I
Yeah.
think you can tell. I think we align on many
Hmm.
things within
For sure.
business and strategy
Yes.
and culture. And so it's been really fun
Yeah.
to talk about because I love for people to hear not just, how we solve the problems, but like what it looks like on the other side. So I appreciate you sharing some of these real world examples. So hopefully people are more inspired to
Yeah.
dive into their business in a way that allows it to stand the test of time. That's really important.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So
Thank you so much for having me.
thank you too. I really appreciate it.